The freezing rain on Interstate 95 felt as cruel as my husband's smile when he slammed the brakes of our luxury SUV. He demanded I get out because I had ruined his mood before the biggest party of his career where his mistress was waiting. He thought I would walk home in shame, but he forgot one thing. I hold the keys to the company safe. This storm would not kill me. It would only wash away my final ounce of stupidity. My name is Mallory, and at 32 years old, I thought I understood the man sitting next to me. I was wrong. The interior of our Audi Q8 felt like a pressurized cabin about to explode as we sped down the dark stretch of Interstate 95. Outside, a ruthless November storm battered the windshield, turning the Connecticut suburbs into a blurred nightmare of gray and white. Inside, the silence was even colder. Declan, my husband of 5 years, yanked at his silk tie with aggressive, jerky movements. He glared at his reflection in the rearview mirror before turning his venom toward me. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" He spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "This pocket square, it clashes with the tie. You want me to look like an idiot in front of the board." "Declan, it matches perfectly. It is the one you chose yesterday," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. He was 35, successful, and handsome, but tonight his face was twisted into a mask of pure irritation. Suddenly, the dashboard lit up. His phone, mounted on the console, buzzed violently. The name flashed across the screen in bright white letters, Kinsley. Next to it was a red heart emoji. My heart stopped. "Who is Kinsley?" I asked, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "And why is there a heart next to her name?" Declan did not panic. Instead, he exploded. He swerved the heavy SUV, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. "I am sick of your jealousy." "She is a colleague. A vital contact. You are suffocating me. Mallory, you are ruining everything." The car lurched as he stomped on the brakes. We skidded onto the gravel shoulder of the deserted highway. The engine hummed aggressively. The rain and snow slashed against the passenger window. I heard the distinct click of the central locks disengaging. "Get out," Declan said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. I blinked, unable to process his words. "What we are on the highway, it is freezing. I am wearing a backless gown." I said, "Get out," he roared, leaning across the center console. "You are killing my vibe. I need to be focused for this party, and you are just dead weight. Get out before I throw you out." "Declan, please, you can't be serious," I stammered, tears welling up instantly. "I have nowhere to go. It's snowing." He did not listen. He shoved my shoulder with brutal force, popping the passenger door open. The freezing wind howled into the warm cabin, biting my skin instantly. He pushed me again, harder this time, until I stumbled out onto the wet asphalt to avoid falling face first. "Walk home, Mallory. Maybe the cold will cool off that attitude of yours," he sneered. He slammed the door shut. I heard the engine roar as he peeled away, the tires spraying gravel and slush onto my legs. I stood there, paralyzed, watching the red taillights of the Audi disappear into the swirling white void. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. The cold was immediate and violent. It soaked through my thin silk dress within seconds. My expensive blowout, which had taken 2 hours to perfect, was plastered to my skull. Mascara ran down my cheeks, stinging my eyes. I was alone on the side of a highway in the middle of a storm. Fear gripped my throat, but then a strange numbness took over. I started walking. I had no choice. The shoulder was littered with debris. After 100 yards, the heel of my right shoe snapped with a sharp crack. I stumbled, twisting my ankle. "Damn it!" I screamed into the wind. I kicked off the broken shoe, then the other. I walked barefoot on the freezing, sharp gravel. Every step was agony. The stones cut into my soles. but the cold was so intense I could barely feel the blood. 10 minutes later, bright headlights cut through the gloom behind me. I didn't even wave. I just kept walking like a ghost. A heavy delivery truck slowed down and pulled over ahead of me. The window rolled down. The driver was an older man with a gray beard. He looked at my shivering, drenched form with an expression of absolute pity. "Miss, my God, get in," he urged, leaning over to open the heavy door. "You are going to freeze to death out there." I climbed up into the cab, my teeth chattering so hard I thought they would crack. The cabin smelled of stale coffee and diesel, but it was warm. The driver reached behind his seat and handed me a rag. "It is just an old shop towel. Smells a bit like oil, but it is dry," he said softly. I took the greasy cloth and pressed it to my face, inhaling the scent of motor oil and kindness. It was the first bit of warmth I had felt all night. The elevator doors slid open to reveal the silent, oppressive luxury of our penthouse. I stumbled inside, shivering so violently that my teeth clicked together. I made my way to the master bathroom and gripped the edge of the marble sink to keep from collapsing. The woman staring back at me from the mirror was a stranger. Her skin was a translucent gray, her eyes were rimmed with red, and her hair, usually a sleek shield of authority, was a matted disaster of frizz and mud. It was hard to believe this broken creature was the chief financial officer of Lumina Corp. At the office, I was sharp, untouchable, and brilliant. Here, in the reflection of my own home, I looked like something that had been discarded in the trash. I wrapped a thick towel around my shoulders, but the chill was deep in my bones. My mind drifted back through the last 5 years of our marriage. It had been a half-decade of silent labor. I was the architect of Declan's success. I was the one who stayed up until 3 in the morning fixing his sloppy financial projections so he could present them as his own genius. I was the one who smoothed over his budget overruns. He was the sales director because I had paved the road for him, filling in the potholes of his incompetence with my own hard work. I had convinced myself it was a partnership. I was wrong. I was just the staff. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with his name. I answered, putting it on speaker, my hands too shaky to hold the device. Mallory Babe. "Are you there?" His voice was thick, slurred with the heavy weight of expensive scotch and victory. "God, I was so worried about you. I tried to turn around. I swear. But the storm, the roads are closed. I had to crash at a hotel near the venue. I am just so relieved you are home." "You are at a hotel?" I asked, my voice sounding like gravel scraping against glass. "Yeah, the Hyatt. Look, I am exhausted. We will talk tomorrow. I love you." The line went dead. He did not sound worried. He sounded euphoric. I did not cry. The tears had frozen on my cheeks hours ago on the interstate. I swallowed 2 extra-strength cold tablets and opened my laptop. Declan was a charismatic salesman, but he was not a detail-oriented man. He had forgotten that as the CFO, I managed the corporate fleet. I had administrative access to the GPS tracking system for every company vehicle, including the Audi Q8 he was driving. I logged in. The map loaded, a grid of gray streets and bright lights. I typed in his license plate number. The little green dot pulsed on the screen. It was nowhere near the Hyatt. It was parked deep within the exclusive gates of Silver Ridge, sitting in the driveway of a massive private estate. I knew that address. It belonged to Kinsley. She was the 24-year-old daughter of the chairman, a girl famous for her wild parties and her inability to keep a job. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. The argument in the car was not about a pocket square. It was a calculated eviction. Declan needed me gone tonight so he could walk into that party with Kinsley on his arm. He was not just cheating, he was networking. He was auditioning for the role of son-in-law to the chairman, clearing the path to the CEO position by sleeping with the golden child. The humiliation on the highway was a power move designed to break my spirit, to make me feel small and worthless so I would never dare to question him. I looked down at my feet. They were raw and bloody, the skin shredded by the gravel road. I touched a jagged cut on my heel, watching a drop of blood stain the white bath mat. The pain was sharp, clarity-inducing. "Okay, Declan," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play games?" He thought he had broken me. He thought I was just a sad wife waiting by the phone. He forgot that I was the one who knew where every single dollar of dirty money was buried in his accounts. Tonight was the last night I would ever be a victim. I pulled up the spreadsheet of his discretionary spending. My plan for revenge would not be emotional or messy. It would be financial, precise, and absolutely terminal. The front door clicked open at 9 o'clock in the morning. Declan walked in holding a bouquet of wilting lilies wrapped in crinkly plastic. I recognized the barcode sticker on the wrapper immediately. They were from the gas station down the street, the kind sold next to the beef jerky and cigarettes. He walked over to the sofa where I sat wrapped in a blanket, his face arranged in a performance of deep regret, but his eyes refused to meet mine. As he leaned in to kiss my forehead, a wave of scent hit me. It was not his usual musk. It was something floral and overly sweet, clashing violently with the stale alcohol seeping from his pores. "Mallory, babe," he sighed, dropping the sad flowers on the coffee table. I felt terrible all night. The storm was it was insane. I tried to drive back, but the police had blocked the roads. "I hope you are okay." I looked at him, forcing my expression into a mask of exhaustion and defeat. If I showed my rage now, I would lose the war before the first battle. "I am fine, Declan," I whispered, coughing slightly for effect. "I think I caught a bad chill walking in the rain. I am going to call in sick and work from home for a few days." He exhaled, his shoulders dropping in visible relief. He believed he had gotten away with it. "That is a good idea. You rest. I have to head to the office to smooth things over after missing the prep meeting." The moment the elevator doors closed behind him, I threw the blanket aside. The sick, weak wife vanished. The chief financial officer took her place. I brewed a pot of black coffee and sat at my dual monitor setup in the home office. I did not log in as his wife. I logged in as the master administrator of the Lumina Corp financial mainframe. I started with the low-hanging fruit. I pulled up the corporate credit card statements assigned to the sales department. Declan had been sloppy. There were dozens of charges labeled as client entertainment at five-star restaurants in the city. I cross-referenced the timestamps with the receipts. The amounts were suspicious. A dinner for two usually did not cost $4,000. I dug deeper into the merchant codes. They were not restaurants. They were luxury boutiques coded as dining establishments in his expense reports to bypass the initial approval filter. I opened a separate tab and loaded Kinsley's Instagram profile. It was public. 3 days ago. She had posted a photo of a limited edition handbag with the caption, "Spoiled by my love." The price of the bag was exactly $4,250. The charge on Declan's corporate card for that same day was $4,250. It was a perfect match, but the handbags were just the tip of the iceberg. I needed to find the body. I accessed the vendor payment history for the new downtown development project. A company named Apex Consulting caught my eye. They had been billing us consistently for 6 months. The invoices were vague, citing structural advisory services. I ran a background check on the tax identification number. It was a shell company registered to a post office box in Delaware. The total amount paid out to Apex in the last quarter alone was $2,300,000. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I accessed the company's internal communication server. Declan thought that when he clicked delete on his emails and chats, they were gone forever. He was an idiot. As the CFO, I had implemented a redundant backup protocol 3 years ago for compliance purposes. Nothing was ever truly deleted. I restored his chat logs. The conversation with the supplier for Apex was illuminating. Just sent the invoice for $300,000. The supplier wrote, "Got it. Approve it by Friday. I need the cash for the down payment." Declan had replied. I scrolled further and found a digital attachment sent 2 weeks ago. It was a mortgage application for a sprawling estate in Greenwich. The applicants listed were Declan and Kinsley. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled to the bottom of the document. There, next to the line for the cosigner to secure the loan against assets, was my signature. He had forged my name. He was not just stealing from the company to fund his affair. He was using illicit funds to buy a life with her, using my credit history and my assets as collateral. Then I saw the email draft he had saved but not yet sent to the legal department. It was a whistleblower complaint, anonymously written, detailing financial irregularities and pointing the finger directly at me. "Oh my God," I whispered, the cold reality settling over me like a shroud. He is not just leaving me. Declan was setting me up. He planned to divorce me, take the money, and then watch from his new mansion while I went to federal prison for the millions he had stolen. If I did not strike first, I was a dead woman walking. I picked up my encrypted hard drive and began to copy everything. Every receipt, every log, every lie. He wanted a war. He was about to find out why I was the one who balanced the books. 3 days later, I walked through the revolving doors of Lumina Corp with a spine made of steel and a face painted in perfect, cold indifference. I was no longer the shivering, broken woman on the side of the highway. I was the chief financial officer, and I was dressed for a funeral my husband's career. I pressed the button for the executive floor. When the doors slid open on the 20th floor, my stomach tightened. Declan was standing in the corner of the elevator car, and Kinsley was leaning against the wall, her hand resting intimately on his forearm. She pulled it away a fraction of a second too late when she saw me. "Mallory," Kinsley said, her voice dripping with the fake sweetness that only the spoiled daughter of a billionaire could master. She looked me up and down, sneering at my tailored suit. "You look better. We were so worried when you ghosted the party the other night. You looked so pale and fragile. It really ruined the mood for Declan." "I had a sudden migraine," I lied, stepping into the metal box with them. The air reeked of her perfume and his arrogance. "I trust you two managed to entertain the clients without me." "We did more than manage," Declan said, puffing out his chest. "And I have huge news. The board finalized the date for the winter gala. It is the biggest night of the year. Mallory, the chairman, is officially stepping down, and he is announcing the new chief executive officer live on stage." He grinned at me, a predator showing his teeth. He did not need to say who he thought the new boss would be. Later that morning, the chairman summoned me to his office. Kinsley's father was a stern, intimidating man who valued competence above all else, which was ironic considering his daughter had never worked a real day in her life. "Mallory," he said, looking over his spectacles, "I want you to handle the entire organization of the gala, the VIP guest list, the media coordination, and most importantly, the year-end financial presentation. I trust your attention to detail." "I would be honored, sir," I replied smoothly. "I will make sure it is a night no one will ever forget." By giving me control of the event, he had just handed me the executioner's axe. That afternoon, Declan came into my office and closed the blinds. He sat on the edge of my desk, invading my personal space. "I need you to do something for me." He lowered his voice. "The sales figures for the fourth quarter are a little weak. I need you to polish them for the presentation. Just shift some of the projected revenue from next year into the current column. Make the growth curve look explosive." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil. "It is for us, babe," he whispered. "Once I am CEO, Our life is going to be so much better. No more stress. Just us enjoying the view from the top. I looked into his eyes and saw the empty promise. He was asking me to commit fraud to secure a promotion he planned to enjoy with his mistress. Of course, Declan, I said, forcing a soft, supportive smile. I will make the numbers reflect exactly what you have earned. He left my office whistling. The moment the door clicked shut, I picked up my personal phone. I had already contacted a private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage. I need eyes on Declan and Kinsley. I told the investigator, I do not want grainy phone pictures. I want high-definition telephoto shots. I want to see them entering the hotel during work hours. I want dates, timestamps, and clarity. You will have them in 48 hours, the voice on the other end promised. For the next 2 weeks, I played the game. I started planting seeds in Declan's mind. I told him I had overheard the board members raving about his leadership in the break room. I told him the chairman was already looking at him with pride. They are obsessed with you. I lied over dinner one night. You have this in the bag. I knew it. Declan laughed, pouring himself a third glass of wine. I am untouchable. My flattery worked like a drug. He became arrogant. He became careless. He stopped locking his phone. He started leaving the office at 3 p.m. with Kinsley, thinking he had already won the crown. He had no idea that while he was busy admiring his reflection, I was busy building the trapdoor he was standing on. The 2 weeks leading up to the winter gala were a blur of 18-hour days. To the outside world, I looked like a devoted wife working herself into the ground to ensure her husband's big night was perfect. In reality, I was a spider weaving a web so intricate that no amount of struggling would save the fly. I sat alone in the dim light of my office, rewriting the code for the main presentation. I did not just polish the graphs. I embedded a macro script into the slide transition. When Declan pressed the clicker for the slide labeled Future Growth, it would not show a bar chart. It would execute a command to play a specific video file I had uploaded to the secure cloud server. I also made a strategic stop at the legal department. I did not hand them the file directly. Instead, I sent an anonymous encrypted email to the head of security and the general counsel, flagging unusual variances in the construction budget. I provided just enough breadcrumbs to ensure they would launch a formal internal investigation exactly 12 hours after the gala ended. I wanted him arrested, not just fired. Then came the pettiness, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I saw a notification on the corporate account alert system. Declan had attempted to purchase a $12,000 designer gown from a boutique in Manhattan. It was obviously for Kinsley. I waited until the transaction was pending. Then I logged into the banking portal and flagged it as fraudulent activity due to suspected identity theft. 10 minutes later, my personal phone rang. It was Kinsley. She was screaming before I even said hello. Mallory, why is the company card being declined? I am standing at the counter like an idiot. Fix it, she screeched. I pressed the record button on my phone to capture her voice. Kinsley, I am so sorry. The bank froze the assets due to high-risk activity. There is nothing I can do remotely. You should probably pay with cash if you want it today. I don't carry that kind of cash. You are useless, she yelled before slamming the phone down. I saved the recording. It was a small victory, but sweet. For myself. I went shopping. I usually wore beige, gray, or navy suits. Safe colors. Invisible colors. Not this time. I bought a floor-length gown in deep, blood-red satin. It was fitted, structured, and dangerous. It was the kind of dress a woman wears when she plans to burn a city to the ground. The night before the gala, Declan came home and sat on the edge of the bed, holding my hand with fake concern. Mallory, I have been thinking, he said, looking at me with those lying eyes. You have been working so hard. You look exhausted. Maybe you should skip the gala tomorrow night. Just stay home, take a bath, and rest. I can handle the speeches. He wanted me out of the way so he could parade Kinsley around without his wife lurking in the shadows. He wanted a clear stage. "Maybe you are right, Declan," I said, forcing a weak smile. "I am very tired. I will stay home." He kissed my cheek, relief washing over his face. "That is my girl. Get some sleep." He had no idea that I did not need his +1 invitation. 5 years ago, I had quietly purchased a small block of stocks in Lumina Corp using my maiden name. I was a shareholder. I had my own ticket, and I had a front row seat to his destruction. Rain lashed against the tinted windows of the hired limousine, a rhythmic drumming that echoed the night my marriage ended on the side of the highway. But tonight, I was not shivering in the cold. I was sitting in the plush leather seat of a Lincoln Continental, sipping sparkling water and waiting for the right moment to strike. The weather felt poetic. It was as if the sky remembered exactly what he had done to me and had returned to witness his retribution. My phone vibrated in my clutch. I glanced at the screen to see a text from Declan. "Babe, the pre-gala meeting is running super late. I will probably grab a room here so I do not wake you up. Don't wait up." Sad face. So, I looked at the message and felt nothing but cold amusement. The GPS tracker on my other screen told a different story. He had checked into the VIP suite of the Ritz-Carlton 2 hours ago. He was not in a meeting. He was getting ready with Kinsley. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton was a sea of diamonds and tuxedos. I bypassed the red carpet and slipped in through the service entrance. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted duck. From the shadows of the velvet curtains, I watched them enter. Declan walked with the swagger of a man who owned the world. On his arm was Kinsley. She looked beautiful, but I noticed the subtle scowl on her face because I had canceled the order for her new gown. She was wearing a silver dress from last season that looked slightly too tight around the waist. She tugged at the hem self-consciously. I made my way up the narrow staircase to the audio-visual control booth overlooking the ballroom. The technician, a young man named Dave, was waiting for me. We had met yesterday. An envelope containing $5,000 in cash had ensured his cooperation and his sudden need for a bathroom break that would last exactly 20 minutes. "All yours, Mrs. O'Connell," Dave whispered, sliding out of the chair. "The system is unlocked." "Thank you, Dave. Enjoy your break," I replied. I sat in the command chair, my fingers hovering over the lighting board. From this height, the people below looked like chess pieces. I spotted Declan near the center table. He was holding a flute of champagne, laughing loudly at something a board member said. He looked radiant, flushed with the anticipation of his coronation. He had no idea that the executioner was watching him from the ceiling. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. The chairman walked to the podium. He looked frail but dignified. "Ladies and gentlemen," the chairman's voice boomed through the speakers. "Tonight marks a new chapter for Lumina Corp. I am proud to introduce a man who represents our future, a man of integrity, vision, and drive. My son-in-law in spirit, if not in name, Declan O'Connell." Thunderous applause erupted. Declan stood up, buttoning his jacket. He bowed humbly to the room, playing the part of the modest genius to perfection. Beside him, Kinsley leaned in and whispered something into his ear, likely a promise of what they would do later to celebrate. He smirked, gave her a wink, and strode toward the stage. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady as granite. I watched him climb the steps. He shook the chairman's hand and took his place behind the podium. He adjusted the microphone, gripped the sides of the lectern, and looked out at the audience with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. "Thank you, sir," Declan said, his voice smooth and commanding. "I am truly humbled." He reached for the clicker to start his presentation. I reached for the enter key on the control panel. The stage was set. "Transparency and responsibility," Declan declaimed, his voice smooth and practiced as it washed over the captivated audience. "These are not mere buzzwords to me. They are the sacred pillars upon which I have built my career at Lumina Corp. Without total honesty, we have nothing." I watched him from the darkness of the control booth, a cold smile touching my lips. He was reading the exact speech I had written for him 3 nights ago while he was out sleeping with his mistress. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. Behind him, the massive LED screen displayed the quarterly revenue charts, the green bars climbing steadily upward in a perfect fiction of success. "Now," I whispered to the empty booth, "let us see how much you like transparency." My finger struck the enter key. The screen flickered violently. The pristine graphs dissolved into static for a split second before snapping into a grainy, shaking image. It was the dashcam footage from the Audi Q8. The timestamp in the bottom corner read November 11th. The high-fidelity sound system, designed to fill a concert hall, blasted the audio into the stunned room. The roar of the storm was deafening. Then, Declan's voice cut through the noise, sharp, cruel, and unmistakable. "Get out. You are killing my vibe. I need to be focused for this party, and you are just dead weight." On the screen, the passenger door flew open. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the ballroom as the audience watched Declan lean over the center console. He shoved me. The force was visible. I stumbled out onto the wet asphalt, the silk of my dress whipping in the wind. The door slammed shut, and the engine roared as the car peeled away, leaving a small, shivering figure alone in the blinding snow. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum, heavy and suffocating. Declan froze mid-gesture. He turned slowly, confused by the lack of applause, and looked up at the giant screen behind him. His face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. "What the— Turn it off!" he screamed into the microphone, his composure shattering instantly. He slammed his hand against the lectern, the feedback screeching through the speakers. Technical difficulties cut the feed. Someone cut the feed. I did not cut the feed. I turned the volume up. The video cut abruptly to a new scene. This one was bright, crisp, high-definition security footage. It was the lobby of Kinsley's exclusive apartment complex. The date was clearly visible. Declan pulled Kinsley close, kissing her deeply right under the security camera. He pulled away and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a sleek, black credit card. "Here." His recorded voice echoed through the speakers, clear as a bell. "Take the corporate card. Buy yourself something nice for the gala. The company is paying for it anyway." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. I saw the chairman stand up, his hand clutching his chest, his eyes wide with disbelief. I was not done. The video faded, replaced by a slideshow of financial documents. They flashed rapidly, one after another, a barrage of undeniable facts. It displayed an invoice from Apex Consulting for a staggering $2,300,000. The status was clearly marked as paid, and the beneficiary account owner listed was none other than Kinsley Vance. I had highlighted the fraudulent numbers in bright, accusatory red. Next came the mortgage application for the Greenwich estate. The camera zoomed in digitally on the signature line. It listed the co-signer as Mallory O'Connell, but right next to it, a digital flag screamed the truth, signature forged. The evidence was overwhelming. It was not just a scandal, it was a felony. The numbers on the screen were huge. $2 million in embezzled funds, $500,000 in fake travel expenses, $40,000 in luxury handbags charged to client entertainment. Declan looked like a trapped animal. He waved his arms frantically at the projection booth, his eyes wild with panic. "This is a lie. I didn't do this. Someone hacked the system. This is AI generated. It is a deep fake." But everyone knew it was real. The specific details, the dates, the undeniable sound of his voice abusing his wife and stealing from his father-in-law were too precise to be fake. I sat back in my chair and took a sip of my water. The presentation was finally accurate. The ballroom erupted into chaos. The silence that had held the room captive shattered into 1,000 fragments of shock and outrage. The elite crowd, usually so composed and restrained, gasped in unison. The noise was deafening. In the front row, Chairman Vance looked as if he had been slapped across the face. His complexion turned a deep, dangerous crimson. He stared at the screen, then slowly turned his gaze toward his daughter and his future son-in-law. His eyes were not filled with fatherly love. They were filled with the cold, hard realization that the two people he trusted most had played him for a fool. Declan was unraveling before our eyes. He scrambled away from the podium as if it were on fire. "This is a setup," he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. He pointed wildly into the darkness of the room, his hand shaking uncontrollably. "It is fake. Someone edited this. It is a deep fake who is doing this to me. Show yourself." He looked pathetic, a man drowning in his own lies, flailing for a lifeline that did not exist. I pressed the master switch on the lighting console. Instantly, the house lights plunged into darkness. The LED screen went black. The sudden darkness silenced the screaming crowd for a heartbeat. Then, a single, blinding white spotlight cut through the gloom. It did not hit the stage. It hit the second-floor balcony where I stood. I stepped forward into the beam of light. My blood-red dress caught the brilliance of the spotlight, glowing against the shadows like a warning flare. I held a wireless microphone in my hand. I looked down at the sea of upturned faces, my expression perfectly calm. "Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen," my voice boomed through the speakers, steady and cold as ice. "I believe an introduction is in order. I am Mallory. I am the wife who was pushed out into the rain so my husband could party. And, more importantly for everyone in this room, I am the chief financial officer who just signed the order to freeze every single asset Declan O'Connell possesses." A collective murmur swept through the room. Down on the floor, Kinsley snapped. The humiliation was too much for her entitled mind to process. She let out a feral shriek and charged toward the staircase leading to the balcony, her eyes locked on me with murderous intent. "You witch, I will kill you!" Kinsley screamed, her face twisted and ugly, but she never made it to the stairs. In her blind rage, she forgot about the frayed hem of her silver dress, the one she had been forced to wear because I canceled her new order. Her heel caught in the loose fabric. She pitched forward, crashing hard onto the parquet floor in a tangle of limbs and cheap sequins. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the crowd. She tried to scramble up, but she just looked pathetic, a spoiled child throwing a tantrum in the ruins of her own making. I did not even blink. I turned my attention back to the chairman, who was staring up at me, his hand gripping the back of his chair for support. "Chairman Vance," I said, addressing him directly, "I have one final piece of evidence for you. The contract for the merger with Orion Group. The one Declan claimed he finalized last week, the signature at the bottom is not yours. He forged your name to authorize the transfer of $4 million into an offshore account." The color drained from the chairman's face completely. This was no longer just a family dispute or an embezzlement scandal. It was a direct betrayal of his authority. It was a felony committed against him personally. Declan froze. He looked at the chairman, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Sir, please. I can explain. She is lying. She is crazy." Chairman Vance did not say a word. He simply closed his eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and then looked toward the back of the room. He raised his hand and made a sharp, cutting motion toward the head of security. It was the signal to end it. The doors to the ballroom burst open. The double doors at the back of the ballroom did not just open, they were thrown wide with authoritative force. The hotel security team led the way, but they were merely the ushers for the real guests. Behind them marched 4 officers from the Economic Crimes Unit and 2 agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I had sent the complete dossier of evidence to the local field office at exactly 8 o'clock that morning, ensuring they had enough time to obtain a warrant before the first appetizer was served. The music died instantly. The room was so quiet that the heavy footsteps of the agents on the plush carpet sounded like thunder. They marched straight to the stage, bypassing the stunned guests who parted like the Red Sea. The lead agent, a stern woman with a badge hanging from her belt, stepped up to the podium and grabbed Declan by the arm. "Declan O'Connell," she announced, her voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery." Declan tried to jerk his arm away, his face slick with sweat. "No, get your hands off me. Do you know who I am, sir? Tell them." He turned frantically toward Chairman Vance, his eyes wide with desperation. "Dad, please, tell them this is a mistake. Help me." The chairman looked at the man he had almost handed his empire to. The look on his face was not one of pity, it was one of absolute disgust. He turned his back on Declan, Kinsley, who had scrambled to her feet, grabbed her father's arm, mascara running down her face in black streaks. "Daddy, do something, make them stop," she wailed. The chairman spun around. In a motion that shocked the entire room, he raised his hand and delivered a sharp and stinging slap across Kinsley's cheek. The sound cracked like a whip. "You covered for him," the chairman hissed, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You helped him steal from me." "You have disgraced this family." Kinsley recoiled, holding her cheek, silenced by the shock of her father's rejection. "On stage!" The agents spun Declan around. He slammed face first into the lectern. I heard the distinct metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting tight around his wrists. He was no longer the golden boy. He was a criminal. As the agents hauled him upright, he lifted his head. His eyes searched the darkness until they found the spotlight. He looked up at the balcony, right at me. I picked up a crystal flute of champagne from the tray I had brought into the booth. I held his gaze, my face completely void of emotion. There was no love left. There was not even anger anymore. There was only the cold satisfaction of a debt settled. I took a slow, deliberate sip. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "Declan," I said, my voice echoing through the silent hall. "You pushed me out into the rain because you wanted to go to a party. I hope you enjoyed this party, because it is the last one you will attend for a very long time." The agents shoved him forward. They marched him off the stage and down the center aisle. The photographers, who had been hired to capture his coronation, now scrambled to document his downfall. Flashbulbs popped in a blinding frenzy, capturing every second of his humiliation. In less than 15 minutes, the career he had spent a decade building was reduced to ash. Security guards grabbed Kinsley by the arms. She kicked and screamed, shouting profanities that made the society matrons clutch their pearls. They dragged her out the side exit, but the press was waiting there too. I could hear the shouting of reporters and the flash of cameras as they descended on her like wolves on a wounded deer. I placed the microphone on the console and turned off the spotlight. The show was over. I walked down the narrow staircase and entered the main lobby. The guests were still standing there, whispering in hushed tones. As I walked toward the exit, silence fell again. They looked at me, the woman in the blood-red dress who had just decapitated the leadership of Lumina-Corp live on stage. They did not look at me with pity anymore. They stepped back, giving me a wide berth. I saw fear in their eyes, and beneath the fear, a deep, terrifying respect. 3 months have passed since the night the media dubbed the Red Wedding of the corporate world. I sat in the corner office that once belonged to the chairman, adjusting the nameplate on the desk. It now read Interim Chief Executive Officer. The board of directors had voted unanimously to give me the position. They did not just trust me, they feared me slightly. which I found to be a highly effective management tool. The office was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed my life just 90 days ago. Justice had been swift and absolute. Because of the sheer magnitude of the fraud and the flight risk established by the offshore accounts I uncovered, the judge had been merciless. Declan was currently residing in a maximum security federal penitentiary upstate. He was sentenced to 12 years. 12 years of staring at gray concrete walls instead of the skyline views he believed he was entitled to. There would be no bail, no parole hearings for a very long time, and certainly no luxury suits. As for Kinsley, her fall from grace was perhaps even harder. Her father, a man of old-school principles who valued his reputation above his bloodline, had cut her off completely. The trust fund was dissolved. The last I heard, the girl who used to sneer at my department store shoes was working the checkout counter at a discount retail chain in New Jersey. She was finally learning the value of $1 the hard way. My assistant knocked softly and walked in, placing a single white envelope on my mahogany desk before retreating silently. It was stamped with the seal of the Department of Corrections. I recognized the messy, frantic handwriting immediately. I did not open it. I knew exactly what it would say. It would be pages of desperate bargaining. Mallory, please. I made a mistake. I can change. I love you. Lies. It was just ink on paper, as empty as his vows had been. I picked up the envelope and fed it directly into the shredder. The machine whirred, eating his pleading words and turning them into harmless confetti. I did not feel a single pang of guilt. I swiveled my leather chair to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the sky had turned a deep, bruised purple, and rain began to streak against the glass. It reminded me of that night on Interstate 95. Back then, the freezing rain felt like a death sentence. It felt like the universe was punishing me for being inadequate. Now, looking at the city lights blurring through the water, I realized I had been wrong. The rain did not come to drown me. It came to wash the dirt from my eyes so I could finally see. It washed away the weak, compliant wife I used to be and revealed the woman who was hiding underneath. The storm had stripped me of everything so that I could rebuild myself into something unbreakable. I reached for the bottle of vintage Cabernet on the side table and poured myself a glass. I raised the crystal to the window, catching my own reflection in the dark glass. The woman staring back was not tired or afraid. She was powerful. She was free. To new beginnings, I whispered to the empty room. I turned back to my desk. A document lay waiting for my signature. It was the petition for a contested divorce, granting me full separation and damages. I picked up my gold pen, the first thing I bought with my new salary, and signed my name with a flourish. I capped the pen, smiled a genuine, victorious smile, and closed the folder. The chapter was done. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below to share your location and your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Mia Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.